Hello fabulous DIYers, it's Daniela Tabois here, and in this episode I'm going to share with you a dress that I'm making for myself. I'm going to show you how to sew this off-the-shoulder halter dress. If you are interested in seeing how to create this, let's begin. I had this embroidered lace fabric in my stash for 2 years, and I decided I wanted to create something that was a little bit off the shoulder with a little bit ruffled detail. Next, I have broadcloth cotton. It's medium weight. I did not get the lightweight because I wanted my dress to have more structure. 1/4 inch elastic, and all the information about what I'm using in this video will be down in the description box. I'm going to be working with my shift dress pattern. I had draped this. I will leave a link for you to go and learn how to drape and create your own pattern. And I also have my sleeve pattern as well that I draped for the shift dress, and I'm going to leave that in the link below. If you don't have a dress form to drape, you can use commercial patterns and apply the techniques that I use in this video to that pattern to create your own patterns. So for my pattern, I went ahead and copied my originals and put those off to the side and worked with my new pattern here. As you can see, I shortened the length of the dress because I didn't want it to be a long dress down to the knee. I want my style to be cute and flirty. So I went ahead and shortened that up when I copied my pattern. So here I'm going to be doing the pivot method. And what I'm doing here is drawing a line through the bust dart and through the princess dart, which I'm going to be cutting through to each point where they meet, not through the point, so I can pivot and close the bust dart and open up the princess dart area. So here you can see I'm cutting it through and I'm going to pivot it. So here I'm pivoting it, making sure the top bottom of the dart will meet with the top part of the dart, the bust dart. And I'm going to tape it down to secure it in place, and you can see that the princess dart is wide open. So now this is going to create the shape of the dress, which is more of a trapeze. Now I'm going to go and create my halter neckline, which is coming up from the armhole. I'm going to come up about 5 inches and then draw a diagonal from the center front line all the way to the armhole, or from the armhole to the center front line. And that will be my halter shape. Now I'm going to apply my pattern onto brown paper so you can better see what's going on, and I'm going to make my adjustments there. So at the center front, I'm going to draw my center front line. You don't have to necessarily trace this, you can really cut it out, but I just like to trace everything. And then I'm going to straighten the side seam, but I'm not going to make it straight. I'm going to curve it in to give me a more shapely on the side, and from the high hip I'm going to bring it out straight down, which is going to be more flared out just a little bit. Then at the bottom, as you can see, the hem is a little bit curved, which is what I want. I'm going to take my hip curve ruler and just straighten the bottom to adjust it to make it more shapely. So I'm not sure how long the dress is on me, so what I'm going to do is add 1 inch to the bottom hem so I can see what it looks like when I cut it out on fabric. So here I am cutting it out, and I added 1/2 inch at the top neckline where the halter is. And here is the front pattern. So here I'm going to put this right down. It's going to be placed on the fold. And I'm going to repeat the same process for the back. But since the back does not have a bust dart, it just have a back dart, I'm just going to draw a line through that back dart when it's time. So for my back, I'm going to do a more of a racer back style. So I came up from my armhole about 5.5 inches for the back, and then drew in my curve back neckline. So here it is. I'm going to cut that piece away. I'm going to draw a line through the princess dart like so, and then cut it through all the way to the neckline, not through the neckline. Once again, I place it on brown paper. I'm adding my inch hemline, and then I'm going to cut out my pattern with a 1/2 inch seam allowance at the back neckline. So here is the back pattern, and now I'm going to take the sleeve pattern, which I retraced, and I'm going to walk it into the armhole of the dress by using the dress pattern. And then I'm going to do the same for the back as well, and this is going to help me create my off the shoulder. So I'm going to cut the top piece, making sure that it matches the back and the front armholes. And now we're going to do this slash so I can spread the pattern. So here I drew a line, 3 sections in my pattern, and I'm going to cut it and slash it through, not all the way through the top, but to the top tip of the pattern. So here you can see that I spread it out on brown paper, and then for the bottom on this pattern, I'm going to make it straight because I want the edge of this pattern to have a scallop. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy the edges of my pattern. And straighten the top part of my sleeve. Now I cut out my pattern. I'm just writing how many pieces I'm cutting out, and here are all 3 patterns done and complete. Now I'm going to go ahead and test them, and then once I've done that, I go ahead and make my adjustments. So I decided to shorten up my dress, and that is what I'm doing right here. And then now I'm going to place it onto the fabric. Now my fabric has a motif that I want to be placed at the center front of my dress, and place my pattern there. Now for the top part, I did not want to bring the edge of the dress to the top tip because I want that scallop to be trim for my neckline. So here I'm placing my pattern onto that edge where the motif is, and then I'm going to cut it out. And then I'm going to cut out the back portion of the dress. And then lastly, whatever was left over, I'm going to cut out my sleeve. I didn't have a lot left, so I'm going to just try to get as much as I can of the sleeve length throughout my pattern. And here it is, and I wanted the edge to have a scallop. So now it's time for me to put my laces together, and what I like to do with laces like this, I like to do a French seam. So what I'm going to do is pin my front and back side seams together on the right side, and then stitch a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And then now I'm going to go ahead and cut 1/8 inch at that seam allowance. And then once I've cut it down like this, it should be 1/8 inch left. And now I'm going to fold it over to case it in on the wrong side. So that way the outside can be nice and clean, and the inside will be cleaned as well. So now I'm casing it in, pinning it into place to get ready to stitch it down 1/4 inch. So here I'm going to go ahead and stitch it and then press it down, and this is what my seam allowance finish looks like, and on the outside it looks like this. So I'm going to do the same technique once again for my sleeve. And here are both of my sleeves nicely and done. And I'm going to go ahead and connect them to the dress armhole. So I'm going to follow the sleeve armhole and connect it to the dress armhole and sew it down a 1/2 inch. Now that I sewed everything down a 1/2 inch at the armhole, it's time for me to sew the back up. For my center back, I wanted a back slit. So I pinned the seam allowance at the center back all the way to the mid section of my back and then sew it a 1/2 inch, leaving that area open. So here it is done, open. Next, it's time for me to apply the lace trim to the neckline and sleeve edge. So now I'm going to go back to the 2 yards of the scallop edge and cut out a 3-inch wide scallop trim from the edge using my straight ruler. As you can see, I'm using my marking chalk to make sure that it is straight when I cut it across the fabric. And this is the trim right here. It's 3 inches wide, and I'm going to apply this along the neckline and top of the sleeve. Now, it's not long enough for me to gather, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the center of this lace trim, and I'm going to apply the center of the lace trim to the center of the point of the halter at the front. And I'm going to pin that into place. Next, I'm going to go and pleat the scallop trim along the neckline to create me some little bit of volume and ruff at the same time. If you have more yardage, you can make this trim area much fuller, but since I'm working with 2 yards, I can do so much. So now I'm taking my time pleating this about 1/2 inch. I'm pleating this all around the neckline, including the top edge of the sleeve, all the way to the back part of the racer neckline. I finished it by ending the edge of the scallop towards the center back line. Once I'm done with that, it looks like this, and this is what the whole entire neckline looks like when I place the scallop edge. Next, I'm creating my straps, and I used 1 inch from the broadcloth and 1 inch of the self fabric from the scraps, and I'm going to just roll it in to create a binding and just top stitch the straps down. So here it is, all done and top stitched. And now I'm going to place that at the center point of the neckline. Now you determine how long your straps to be. I already pre-cut mine beforehand. Once I've placed that at the neckline, I'm going to place it towards the back square part of the neckline. And now it's time for me to sew my lining together. So now I cut out the patterns, my dress patterns on the broadcloth, and also did a French seam on the inside of the fabric. And now I'm going to place and sandwich all of that in between the self fabric and the lining. I'm going to connect the center back with the lining, that's the open part, all the way down to the point where it ends on the self fabric, so that way it can stay open and I can put up hook when it's time for me to apply it. So once I have everything pinned, it looks like this, and I'm going to stitch the neckline down. Once I've stitched it down, this is what it looks like. It needs a good press, so I'm going to press all seams and edges down. So here's the neckline and here's the center back as I pull it through the fabric. Now, as always, with a cotton fabric, I'm going to also place that right on top of my lace, so that way I don't want my lace to burn if anything shall happen. So this is what it looks like once it's complete. So I have a slit open back that is fully lined. So the only thing that is open and raw is my armhole, which I'm going to show you how I'm going to finish it. So here's the inside part of the lining. Now the top edge of my sleeve is raw. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply some binding on the inside so that way it can clean up that edge. And then I'm going to clean the armhole by connecting the lining and the soft fabric together. So I cut out 2 pieces of bias strip at 1 inch. I'm going to place one of those strips at the top edge of the sleeve and pin it into place. Here it is, and then I'm going to cut off the excess at the edge because I want to tuck that part in underneath the lining when it's time. So you can see that I did not stitch the lining all the way to the seam allowance of the armhole. I kind of left it a 1/2 inch because I'm going to go ahead and seal that a little bit later. But now I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch right here, and then I'm going to flip all that excess seam allowance at that top edge into this binding, and then the binding will cover it, and I'm going to flip it inside the sleeve top edge and then top stitch it down onto the self fabric, but not onto the ruffle, because the ruffle will get stitched down and I don't want that look. I want it to look like it's stitched only on the inside. So here's what I was talking about. As you can see that it is stitched on the inside, making the top edge of the arm sleeve clean and is not stitched onto the ruffle. Now I'm going to go from inside to clean that armhole. So I'm going to connect the armhole self fabric onto the lining of the armhole of the dress. So I'm going to go from the inside and connect them, and I'm going to sew it a 1/2 inch as well to go ahead and clean that up. And I'm going to sew a 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way to the point it can't go any further. Then I'm going to create some slits at the curve to allow the fabric to ease on that curve. So I'm going to go ahead and just create some little slits around the curve to help ease the fabric, and then press it down to lay everything nice and flat. And then I have a clean armhole that is fully lined. So next up, I wanted my sleeve edge to have a little bit of ruffle to kind of play back to the neckline. So what I did is I wanted to add a little bit of elastic to create that detail. So from the bottom edge is a scallop detail I came about 2 inches from the top and drew in a line, a guideline on the inside of the sleeve to help me know where to place my elastic when I sew it on. So here I just pre-measured how wide I wanted the sleeve opening to be with the elastic, and then I take the elastic to the machine and place it onto where I drew in my guideline, and then I'm going to follow that and pull and stretch as I sew. Now once I've done that, this is how it ended up looking, and then I went ahead and did a 3/8 of an inch roll back on the lining of my dress and on the self fabric as well. And once I was complete, I gave my dress a good press, and then it is ready to wear. So here is the final look. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know down in the comments which way you liked how I paired it. And if you haven't subscribed, do subscribe to see more videos like this. Thanks for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye guys.